If you're a mapper, I'm gonna guess you've probably been disappointed at least once by the various map entity limitations in Half-Life. For example, Multi-Manager only supports 16 entries. Func Door isn't breakable, neither are Func Train, Func Door Rotating, and a bunch of other moving entities. Ambient Generic is too confusing. You just want a simpler solution. Let's attempt to address some of the above, and write a really useful map entity that is basically a timer. Starting off with the simplest one, Multi-Manager's limitation of 16 entries is pretty arbitrary, it's just one number. The max multi-targets constant in cbase.h is 16, and you can change it to something like 32 or 64 if you want. Now, Ambient Generic, oh boy. Some beginner mappers really don't like it because it's kinda confusing to use, so let's make our own simpler one instead. You'll start off by writing an entity class. In spawn and precache, we're just gonna check if the mapper has set any sounds for the entity. If not, it's gonna be removed because it's useless. We're gonna use pev noise because it seems logical enough so we don't have to, use custom key values and stuff. Now we got all that sorted, but what about the part where we actually play the sound? Well, we can use the emit sound function. This function takes quite a few parameters. The first one is the entity that will be the sound source. This is either convenient or inconvenient depending on your needs. The second parameter is the sound channel. You see, if you play two sounds in the same channel, they're gonna get overridden by the latest one. There are various channels to choose from though, so don't worry, and there is one which basically allocates a new channel for every new sound. It's called chan static, though there is still a limit. Anyway, the third parameter is the sample itself, an actual path to the sound file, and it must be pre-cached. The fourth parameter is the volume, ranging between 0 and 1. You could perhaps go higher than that, but I think it gets clipped. Finally, we have attenuation. It controls how the sound will get quieter as we move away from it. An attenuation value of 0 means the sound is never gonna fall off with distance. It's gonna play everywhere at the same volume. We'll use normal attenuation here, which gives us about 500 units of audible radius, I believe. If you want the mapper to be able to customize that, you can add a key value for that. Oh yeah, we forgot to pre-cache the thing. And there, it should be more or less done. Now you can write the FGD and test the entity. Now, breakable doors and trains are a bit complex, so that's gonna have to be in a separate video. We could just inherit from func breakable and add door functionality, or inherit from func door and add breakable functionality, but honestly, if you ask me, that's a pretty bad approach. You see, if I were you, I would rather write a breakable component and add that to these entity classes as a member variable. But anyway, now finally, trigger timer. Frankly, this thing is so simple, I think some of you have already tried doing it. But let's do it together now. So if you know anything about think, touch and use, you'd probably know how a timer trigger could work. First of all, the mapper would set up the entity by setting its name and a delay value, indicating how often the timer would trigger things. Now, some other entity in the map would have to trigger it in order for it to start working. Then the timer would start thinking every X seconds and trigger its targets every time, until of course it's disabled. We'll use a member variable to keep track of its status. So here's all the boilerplate for that. Because we're going to be saving and restoring it, we'll also need to use the big bool data type instead of the C++ bool. And in spawn, we're going to do nothing. Delay time is going to be a key value, by the way. If you don't know how to do key values, you can look at one of the previous videos, 2.3 key values in save restore. In the use method, we're just going to flip enabled and let the entity think immediately. And in the think method, we're going to call sub-use targets. And finally, we're going to set the next think time. Also, we need to put all of that into a condition, so it only works when the timer is enabled. And that's it, now we can write the FGD and test the entity. This video marks the end of chapter 2, though it's not gonna be the last one in the chapter. You see, I accidentally forgot about spawn flags, and although they're easy to figure out, I will still make a video about those and insert it somewhere between 2.2 and 2.3, somewhere in the future. Yeah, just like that. So what awaits us in chapter 3 then? Well, for starters, we're gonna do a little bit of trace lines and vector maths. Sounds scary, doesn't it? And then we're gonna focus on the animation system, which includes hitboxes, bone attachments, bone controllers, animation events, and a bunch of other stuff, and then we're gonna do some cool effects with temporary entities. I'm not sure when the next video will be out, because I'm gonna have exams this week here, so I'll be studying for a while. But until then, happy programming!